very good evening to all our viewers. You're watching Primetime News on TV1. For the News First team, I'm Newti Koshia. Before we head into your stories in detail, let's start off with a look at tonight's headlines.
Attack in Ukraine's region of Donbass. Ukraine's president to issue weapons to everyone who wants them. Power cuts of more than 5 hours tomorrow. Will power cuts be imposed in Colombo? SJB MPs stage protest against power cuts. Energy Minister informs Parliament of remaining fuel stocks.
Petrol 92 दिन 10කටත් petrol 95 दिन 40කටත් ලංකා ඔටෝ ඩීසල් දින 8කටත් සුපර් ඩීසල් දින 8කටත් මේ මොහොතේ තොග පවතිනවා ඉදිරියේදී තොග ලැබීමට නියමිතයි.
Opposition leader questions government's failure to provide scientific decisions.
වියත් විසඳුම් ලබා දෙනවා කිව්වා Oracle එකෙන් දෙනවා කිව්වා Internet of Things වලින් ලබා දෙනවා කිව්වා.
Halt land grabbing in the north. MPs from Tamil political parties stage protest opposite Presidential Secretariat. President visits mechanical factory of Sri Lanka Railways, commissioned to investigate problems of workers.
Starting off with some news here at home, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa visited the mechanical factory of the Sri Lanka Railway Department today in Ratmalana.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was joined by Transport Minister Pavitra Wanyarachi and State Minister Dilum Amunagama on a visit to the mechanical factory of Sri Lanka Railways. The President had instructed officials to sell about 6,700 metric tons of scrap metal that were lying unused at the factory and to use that revenue to meet the requirements of workers. He spoke to a few workers at the factory during the visit. The President instructed to resolve issues relating to recruitments, promotions and resource management in 2 months.
qualification එකක් ගන්නවද?
The President instructed the Transport Minister to set up a commission to resolve the problems of railway employees.
Let's now take a look at a story that is developing rapidly internationally. Tensions between Ukraine and Russia have been escalating since this morning. Now, Sri Lanka's foreign ministry has instructed the embassy to coordinate the return of Sri Lankans to the country. Sri Lankans in Ukraine can contact the embassy on the following numbers that can be seen on your screen. Now, more than 40 Ukrainian and 50 Russian soldiers have already been killed, along with 18 civilians, after Russia began its attack on Ukraine this morning. We're now joined by Newsfirst's Azra Asan, who has the latest on this story. Over to you, Azra.
What you just witnessed and what you just heard is a situation in Ukraine right now. Now, what led to this? Russian President Vladimir Putin announced this morning that he will be launching a special military operation in the Donbas area in the east of Ukraine. Now, this region comprises of two main parts, that is Donetsk and Luhansk. Now, these are the two breakaway regions that the Russian president recently declared as independent. And this is where the attack began this morning. Russian president in a televised speech this morning said that he made this decision as a response to the threats leveled by the Ukrainian president.
Donbass's People's Republics asked for help from Russia. I decided to conduct a special military operation. Its goal is the protection of people who, during 8 years, suffer from abuse and genocide from the Kyiv regime.
Putin urged Ukrainian soldiers in Donbas to lay down weapons and return to their homes. He had warned other countries that any attempt to interfere with the Russian action would lead to consequences they have never seen.
Minutes after the president's speech, Russia sent its first missiles to Ukraine. Now, this led to many casualties and injuries in Ukraine, and people started fleeing their homes as the attacks continued.
Explosions were reportedly heard in the eastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol earlier this morning. Afterwards, explosions were heard elsewhere, including areas like the capital, Kyiv. A Ukrainian presidential advisor said Russian forces are attacking Ukraine from the north, east and south. Ukrainian border guards released footage of what they said were Russian military vehicles moving from the Crimean border. As attacks continued, long lines of cars jammed the road leading outside Kyiv, and residents massed at the railway station. After the initial explosions in Kyiv, people could be heard shouting in the streets.
Ukraine shut its entire airspace down as a response to the Russian military operation. The president even implemented the martial law in the country. Martial law is where you give temporary control to the military over civil functions and law.
We broke off diplomatic relations with Russia. Ukraine is defending itself and will not give up its freedom, no matter what Moscow thinks. Russia vilely and suicidally attacked our state in the morning, just like fascist Germany did during the Second World War.
State media quoted the president as saying he will issue weapons to everyone who wants them. The United Nations Secretary General urged Russia to give peace a chance. This was when the matter came up at the UN Security Council meeting. The US and several other countries have condemned the Russian attack on Ukraine.
President Putin, in the name of humanity, bring your troops back to Russia. In the name of humanity, do not allow to start in Europe what could be the worst war since the beginning of the century.
US President Joe Biden issued a statement over the Russian announcement. He said, quote-unquote, the world will hold Russia accountable. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the military alliance would defend every inch of its territory should Russia attack a member country, as he slammed Moscow for launching a brutal act of war on Ukraine.
NATO allies condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. It is a blatant violation of international law, an act of aggression against a sovereign, independent and peaceful country, and a serious threat to Euro-Atlantic security.
How will this situation have an impact on Sri Lanka?
This problem can worsen in terms of the energy sector and in terms of goods and services. About 80% of the transactions take place using US dollars. It will influence the economy and politics of our country and the entire region as well. We should rethink our foreign policy and international ties and follow a non-aligned policy that will protect national security.
The Ceylon Electricity Board imposed power cuts of at least 4.5 hours today. Now, several people have been affected as a result of these power cuts. The people of Galinbindunuvava in Anuradhapura spent their nights in fear of marauding wild elephants that encroach into the village. Wild elephants from Ritigala, Habarana, Beruvava and Huruluvava are now able to encroach into the village easily as power cuts have made electric fences inactive. Farmers who make up a majority in the village have installed an electric fence to prevent wild elephants from destroying their cultivations. But as a result of power cuts at night, wild elephants are now encroaching into the village easily, leaving behind a trail of destruction.
There is no point of talking about this. Power cuts are imposed at 6 p.m. Electric fences have been installed as well. But at 6 p.m. these elephants encroach into the village and destroy everything in its path. I am old now. I don't have the strength to do this. Elephants destroyed 12 coconut trees behind my cultivation. We are helpless. We don't even have kerosene oil.
Farmers say they have no option but to reap their harvest a month earlier to prevent them from being attacked by wild elephants. The people of Jayanthigama in Khantale are also facing a similar plight. Wild elephants that encroached into the village last night had destroyed a house completely. Our correspondent reported that a pregnant woman had been able to escape the attack as she had gone to the hospital. Human activity may be resulting in wild elephants losing their habitats. However, for the villagers in those areas, power cuts are blocking efforts to drive them away.
Several fires had occurred due to candles and lamps amidst power cuts in the country. A house in Kosgoda Gaol was damaged after a fire was caused by a candle last night. The incident occurred when the people had left their house while the candle was burning. Another fire broke out at a house in Kinya after an oil lamp had fallen over last night. Police said this had occurred during the power cut.
People in some areas say they don't experience power cuts. The secretary to the Ministry of Power, Vasantha Pereira, said power supply won't be cut off to hospitals, water purification plants, high security zones and locations that are crucial for national security. The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka has granted approval to impose power cuts for more than 5 hours tomorrow. Accordingly, the areas that come under groups A, B and C will experience power cuts of 4 hours and 40 minutes. All other areas will experience power cuts for 5 hours and 15 minutes. To find out what time your area will experience a power cut, visit www.newsfirst.lk. The Ceylon Electricity Board yesterday said that power cuts will be imposed in areas between Colombo 1 to 15 from today. However, no schedule has been announced yet. Samagi Jana Balawege MPs held a protest in Parliament opposing the decision to impose power cuts. The MPs held the protest with torches while carrying placards opposing the current situation. Parliamentary sessions were adjourned this morning after a debate ensued in Parliament as MP Harin Fernando had brought a torch with him. A confrontation had occurred when the police had requested an MP to examine an object brought by him to the complex without permission. Bringing such objects to Parliament can have a massive impact. It can be used as a form of chemical attack. This is a problem that concerns the security of the Parliament.
අධික ප්‍රමාණයක් මුළු පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේම ආරක්ෂාව පිළිබඳ ප්‍රශ්නයක්. ප්‍රශ්නේ තිබුණේ මගේ බෑග් එකේ ටෝච්චු.
There were 3 torches in the bag. I brought the torches because there are power cuts. It's not wrong to bring torches. If there is a power cut when I'm using the washroom, I can use this. That's why I brought this.
කරන්ට් ගියොත් එහෙම টয়ලට් කරන්නේ කොහමද? ඒකයි මේ ටෝච් එක කරන්නේ. හරි. පූර්වව අන්ධකාරයක් පතු වෙනව බව දැනගෙන නම් ආවේ. ඒ පිළිබඳ
An investigation should be conducted if you already know that a power cut is to be imposed. Even if there is a power cut, it's clear that this is unlawful. It goes against parliamentary practices. I am requesting to ban this immediately. Otherwise, our safety is at risk.
මේක තහනම් නොකරොත් කතානායකතුමනි අපේ ආරක්ෂාව බරපතල තත්ත්වයකට පරිවර්තනය වෙනවා. කනගාටු වෙනවා. එහෙම උපකරණ.
It's clear as to why this object was brought here. As all of you are not ready, I will now adjourn sittings for 10 minutes. The Speaker expressed these comments as parliamentary sittings resumed afterwards. It would be better if all of you can take the torches back home, as they have cadmium batteries. You will be able to use that to good effect at night.
If they had priority to the country's energy security and managed it properly, they should have purchased fuel that would be enough to meet the country's demand. Yesterday, the minister said there is no shortage of diesel, petrol, kerosene and milk powder, and that there is only a shortage of dollars. What is the root cause for all of these problems? All of you said that the 20th Amendment is required to do the job well. But a dollar shortage has arisen with the 20th Amendment. At times the government is at the mercy of India, Pakistan and Qatar as they go begging for dollars. They give away the government's reputation as well. I wish to ask you what is the national policy to resolve this crisis. I wish to remind the minister that the government didn't prioritize ordinary solutions. They promised to provide intelligent solutions through the use of biotechnology and artificial intelligence. I wish to request you to kindly inform the country and the House of the solution.
මම කාරුණික ඔබතුමාගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා කරුණා කරලා මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට ලබා දෙන විසඳුම රටටත් මේ සභාවටත් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කියලා.
පෙට්‍රල් 92 දින 10කටත් පෙට්‍රල් 90
There is octane 92 for 10 days, octane 95 for 40 days, auto diesel for 8 days and super diesel for 8 days as well. We are to receive more stocks in the future. Out of the fuel stocks that we received so far, 6,000 metric tons are to be given to the Ceylon Electricity Board and 4,200 metric tons to the Sojitz power plant. According to the tender that we have awarded to purchase furnace oil, we will receive 30,000 metric tons of furnace oil by the 3rd of March. If we open the letters of credit on the correct date, the government will be able to ensure a continuous supply of fuel for thermal power plants. The Sapukaskanda oil refinery produces 900 metric tons of furnace oil daily. We will need $1.2 billion to import fuel in the next 3 months. We expect it would be enough to last for 6 months. Out of that, we hope to import fuel for $500 million under the Indian credit line. We admit there is a crisis. For more than a year, we continue to warn that there is a foreign exchange crisis. This is the country's problem and not one of the government. If the government is doing something wrong, tell us what we should do. We will accept our mistakes and rectify them. If we fall in trouble, it won't be just the government that is affected, but the country we all love.
ආණ්ඩුව නෙවෙයි අපි හැමෝටම තියෙන අපේ ආදරණීය මව්බිම කියන එක අපි හැමෝම සිහිය තියාගන්න වෙනවා.
Many filling stations in the country haven't received enough fuel. A fuel station in Maradana was closed this morning after it ran out of fuel.
මෙම කියන්නේ අපිට කණ්ඩක් නැති වෙනවා අන්තිම පොලිමේ ඉඳලා දවසම ඉවරයි. සාම රුපියල් 100යි වාගෙන තියෙන උදේ ඉඳලා පාන්දර 5 ඉඳලා.
නැවේ තියෙනවා තෙල් කියනවා. මිනිස්සු අමාරුවේ කොරෝනා වුණා අනිත් රටවල වලටත් උනානේ. මේම දෙයක් වෙලා තියෙනවද? ලංකා ඉතිහාසයේ කවදාකවත් වෙච්ච නැති දෙයක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
මේක මහා පුදුම ලෝකයක් වුණා. රසාකෑම තමයි පළවෙනි කාරණාව. තිබිච්ච දේවල් ඔක්කොම නිකන් දින්නේ ඔක්කොම විකුණා ගත්තා. දැන් ඉතින් හිඟා ගන්න තමයි වෙන්නේ රටටම.
Our correspondent reported that one filling station in Maradana only sold diesel. A fuel station at the Waligama town received fuel after 2 days today. People were seen in long queues since this morning.
හැමදාම ඉතින් මේ විදියට රටේ ජනතාව අසරණභාවයට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලන්ට එක ගාණක් නැහැ. පේනෝනේ පෙට්‍රල් අරගෙන වැඩට යන ගමන් පාරේ හිඟා කනවා අපි. එන ගහන අපරාධයක් මේ කරලා තියෙන්නේ. සැපයි දැන් හොඳටම සැපයි.
Long queues were seen at a fuel station at the Dambula town to purchase diesel.
20,000 metric tons of fuel is shipped on 200,000 barrels. 37,500 metric tons of fuel was shipped on 2 vessels. That's more than 800,000 barrels. That means they have paid more than $2 million for emergency purchases. Only 4 companies are supplying fuel to the government. So why aren't we going for a long-term contract with these companies? That is because they want to exploit the situation through emergency purchases. The chairman says 5 ships will be arriving this week, and if 5 ships are arriving, this means we have to pay a demurrage charge of another $200,000 to $300,000. When 5 ships are brought down every week, how is it possible to even unload them at once? Don't they know that the dollars that can be used to import milk powder for children are now ending up in the pockets of one person? This is a scheme. If the government opposes this move, those responsible must be sacked immediately. If we remove the energy minister, the minister of power who can't control the CEB engineers will also resign. Otherwise, he can be removed.
Still in local news, Professor Ranjit Bandara attended a media briefing organized by the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna on the economic situation of the country. Now this was how he responded to journalists at the briefing.
ඔබතුමාට මම කිව්වා ඔබතුමා මගෙන් පටන් ගත්ත එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහනවා කියලානේ හරිද ප්‍රශ්නවලට උත්තර දෙන්න ඕන හරි නමුත් දැන් අපි වෙලාව කල්පනාකරණය කරගන්නත් ඕනේ දැන් අහන්නකෝ වෙලාවක් තියෙන වෙලාවක මාධ්‍ය හමුදාන්න කිව්වා ඔයාගේ මාධ්‍ය හැසිරීම පිළිබඳ මට ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා අහන්නකෝ ප්‍රශ්නේ ඇතුළු බොහෝ පිරිස් චෝදනාවක් කරා ඔබතුමා මේ සොයරි බැඳුම් කරහරහා ඒ ඩොලර් මිලියන 500 ගෙවන වෙලාවේ මේක මේ වෙලාවේ ගෙවිය සුදුසුයිද නැද්ද ආණ්ඩුව තියෙන්නේ
The government is not appointed to do what the opposition says. When the opposition comes to power, they can do what they want. Therefore, the government led by Gotabaya Rajapaksa is not bound to implement what Harsha De Silva, Eran Vikramaratne or Patali Champika Ranawaka is saying. I am not angry. I am speaking the truth. The government responsibly decided that they would go ahead to pay the loan.
A group of MPs representing Tamil political parties held a protest opposite the presidential secretariat today. Now they opposed moves to grab lands in the northern and eastern regions.
Parliamentarians of 4 Tamil political parties began a protest opposite the presidential secretariat at 9 a.m. today. They raised concerns over moves to take over lands of the people in the north and east under the guise of conservation and archaeology. Parliamentarians from the Tamil National Alliance, Tamil Progressive Front and the Tamil National People's Front attended the protest. A tense situation arose after some men were seen filming the protest on their mobile phones.
This is the problem. He is in civil, he is not even wearing uniform and he is video recording 12 MPs right outside the president's office and he is walking away. This is the state that the MPs have to face. You can imagine what our Tamil civilians, ordinary civilians have to face outside Colombo in the north and the east. We want to meet the president. Otherwise we'll stay here and we'll tell the world that this is the issue and we'll leave. Unless the president meets us.
We have people from the intelligence coming and taking photographs, threatening us. Just outside the presidential secretariat. From their attire, you know that. And we asked them, they run away. This is the second person who did that this morning. That is to intimidate, threaten us from voicing our opinion.
This issue hasn't been resolved yet. It has aggravated. We can't tolerate this anymore. The Mahawali authority is giving away at least 3 or 5 acres of land that are used to rear animals. Forest lands that were used to cultivate pulses for 5 or 6 decades are being taken over. State Minister Vimalavira Disanayaka is allocating lands belonging to the wildlife among 500 people so that they receive 3 acres each. In Mana, we saw a SLPP MP had taken away a rock of archaeological importance. We can't accept that. We are not a part of a trade union. There are at least 13 public representatives who were elected to parliament. If you add up the votes received by all of us, it will amount to about 1.5 million. The president and the president's secretary must remember that. An employee at the presidential secretariat then informed the MPs that they would be able to attend a meeting with the Prime Minister.
ජනාධිපතිතුමාව හම්බ වෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් හම්බ වෙමු. නැත්නම් අපේ වැඩ කරගෙන අපි යනවා ඉදිරියට.
අගමැතිතුමා දැනුත් කතා කරලා කිව්වේ එතෙන්ට එන්න අර්ගයා මන්දිරේට. එතන හම්බ වෙන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ අගමැතිතුමා. ටෙම්පල් රේස් වල අගමැතිතුමා බලන් ඉන්නවා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ එනකම් හම්බ වෙන්න වාසියවත් වෙනවා. මෙතන වෙලා රිපෝට් පාර ගන්න. පස්සේ අපි කතා කරමු.
The MPs dispersed after engaging in the protest for more than 2 hours. The President's media division said that the MPs had not given any prior notification to hand over the memorandum to the President. In a statement, it said that this is a conspiracy to tarnish the government's image ahead of the UN Human Rights Council sessions.
The MPs who attended the protest opposite the Presidential Secretariat also held a demonstration in Parliament.
The Inter-University Students Federation held a protest opposite the Education Ministry in Battaramulla today. They are demanding the authorities to reopen universities.
Tensions arose opposite the Education Ministry when university students attempted to remove the barricades set up at the gate. Some student representatives were allowed to attend a discussion afterwards. They have given permission to conduct musical shows and carnivals in the country, but Basil Rajapaksa is carrying out his political agenda without any hindrance. But our universities are closed for more than 2 years. We need to discuss this with the relevant officials. Please allow that. They called off the protest after authorities said they would resolve the problem in 2 weeks.
Trading was halted at the Colombo Stock Exchange for 30 minutes today. Now this is the 4th time that trading was halted this week. The ASPI dropped by 5% while the S&P SL index dropped by 5.21% compared to the previous close. The day's turnover was recorded at 3.7 billion rupees. Moving on to some news overseas, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has revoked the emergency powers he invoked just over a week ago to end a weeks-long anti-government protest that paralyzed the country's capital. Speaking to reporters last afternoon, Trudeau said the Emergencies Act was necessary to help law enforcement agencies disperse large numbers of protesters who had descended on Ottawa in anger over coronavirus measures, among other grievances. Trudeau said, quote-unquote, "We will continue to be there to support provincial and local authorities if and when needed." A large group of Canadian truckers and their supporters converged on the Canadian capital late last month as part of the so-called Freedom Convoy. The protesters, which included some far-right convoy organizers, called for an end to all coronavirus measures in Canada and for the government to be removed, among other things. The Chartered Institute of Professional Managers of Sri Lanka held its annual International Management Conference in Colombo today.
This year's conference was organized around the theme Management Practices Decoded, Disruption and Choices. The founder and president of CPM, Professor Lakshman Vatavalla, in his welcome address noted that the voices of citizens or stakeholders of the country must be heard.
So the crisis is really affecting all areas of our economy. People should realize that we are in a crisis situation. This has to come from the top and not from the bottom. Today we see the people shouting from the bottom, and the people at the top should get the message. We call it listening to the stakeholders. Stakeholders are the most important element.
Professor Errol D'Souza of the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad addressed the physical and online audiences as the guest of honor.
And so the regulator had to decide, how do I use the vaccine?
While Professor Charles Wood of the University of Tulsa, USA, also spoke at the inauguration event.
Again, my name is Charles Wood. I'm at University of Tulsa, and I'm...
The keynote address was delivered by Executive Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Group, Shivan Daniel.
Leadership is ultimately decisions. Management is ultimately decisions. The higher the quality of your decisions, the more successful you will be. So here we are standing on the edge of a new world. And it's very, very, very important that we assess the information that we have around us.
Dr. Saman Ratnayaka of the Governing Council headed the technical forums, which began soon after the morning session. Topics such as leadership and focus and the best management practices in the new normal were amongst the thoughts and ideas shared by experienced and accomplished speakers during the technical session panel discussion held during the conference. The Institute of Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka counts over 3,000 members in its ranks and is a member of the Association of Management Development Institutions in South Asia.
And with that, it's a wrap of Primetime News here on TV1. For the News First team, I've been Nyuki Poshia, along with our sign language interpreter Brian De Cruz via Zoom. Take care and good night.